Hello, everybody. My name is Josh Martin, and I'm a senior math and political science major from Decorah, Iowa. And I am here today to talk to you guys about poverty and the welfare state. Now, first, I want to propose a couple of scenarios for you to imagine. First of all, picture a family of four. So let's say the father's 55 years old, has worked at the same warehouse for 30 years, and he's had stable employment his entire life. They've never really had issue paying the bills, but they don't make much by all means. Up comes 2008 and the Great Recession, and next thing you know, he's out of work. At 55 years old and working in warehouses, not too many people are looking to hire him. He might find jobs for a week or two at a time, off and on work for a couple of months, but eventually he realizes that he just can't find stable work anymore. So what does he do? He finally applies for benefits through the US government. Now, this really hurts him. He's embarrassed. There's a significant social stigma attached to these benefits that he is now applying for. And it really hurts him inside to feel that he's failed his family. He hasn't, of course, but the stigma is just so significant. Or picture a single mother of one who is unemployed and is receiving benefits from the government. Now, because she is receiving benefits from the government, she has to constantly be looking for work and actually might be pushed into a job if the government decides that it's a good fit for her. So let's say she's pushed into a job 45 minutes away at a restaurant, working from noon to 10 p.m. every single day. Now, her child is in school, but maybe luckily she has parents who are able to take the kid to school and pick them up every day. But on top of working every day, she has to come home and work the double shift of being a single mom on top of that. She has to cook, clean, take care of the child, spend time with the child. Now, why can't these people get out of poverty? Why don't we have policies in place that fix this problem? Well, it all started in 1996 with Bill Clinton's sweeping welfare reform, which focused on workfare or welfare-to-work programs. These programs are somewhat based on the idea that you can't really trust people in poverty to make decisions that are best for themselves. In fact, government knows best, essentially. Now, these policies are actually really inefficient. They seem to make sense because they're means tested, which means that you're only giving money to people who need it, but this requires a lot of bureaucracy. For every application that's filled for food stamps or TANF, there needs to be a person reading that application. For every interview to determine whether or not someone qualifies, you need someone to actually sit down and do that interview. And thus, the money that we spend on welfare every year, a significant amount of it goes towards paying for this huge bureaucracy. On top of that, I already mentioned the stigma that's associated with these programs. It really is propagated through these programs because if someone isn't receiving a benefit, they can point to someone and say, oh, you're on food stamps. That means you're poor, and I'm not because I'm not on food stamps. That's not fair. Furthermore, they're really confusing. There are 97 means-tested programs in America that you can apply for today. How can you possibly know which ones you're eligible for? Take the example of the guy who just lost his job and has work maybe 2 weeks at a time. Is he employed or unemployed? It's really hard, and their status is constantly changing. So where can we go from here? How can we reform the welfare state? I'm here today to talk to you about the universal basic income. The universal basic income is an unconditional, non-withdrawable income paid to every man, woman, and child on the basis of citizenship. So I would receive it, all of you would receive it, Bill Gates would receive it, and people in poverty would receive it. Now, I know that sounds kind of ridiculous and wasteful. Why would you give Bill Gates more money? He clearly doesn't need it. However, this is actually a very efficient way to do welfare. Because there's no bureaucracy, there's no interviewing, there's no applications, you can cut down significantly on the money that is paid towards bureaucracy because all that's required is one simple check every single month to every citizen, or you could do it through a financial transaction into a bank account. On top of that, the basic income has no social stigma attached to it. If we all receive it, you can't point at someone and say, oh, you're on the basic income, you're poor, because you're on the same basic income. The stigma just isn't there compared to the workfare stigma. Furthermore, it's very simple. There's only one basic income. There aren't 97 different kinds. Thus, I really do think the universal basic income is a good way to go for welfare. Now, another big effect it has is on work disincentivization. Now, these two graphs right here were compiled by a British academic named Malcolm Torrey, who I'm actually going to be able to work with next year, and I'm really excited for that. But he just recently wrote a book called Money for Everyone, Why We Need a Citizen's Income. And the citizen's income is the same thing as the universal basic income. Now, if you look at the top graph, you'll see how it is currently working with workfare policies. Now, the UK and US have similar welfare states, so it's okay to compare the two. As you can see, As someone moves from unemployment to employment, they lose a lot of government benefits, meaning that the actual net wage increase isn't there. On top of that, if you have a minimum wage job and you get a promotion into a supervisory role, that increase in income, you're going to lose a lot of benefits as well. So it's not going to be as much of an increase in net wages as you would want it to be. Now compare that to the citizen's income or the universal basic income. On the bottom there, you see that you are always guaranteed this basic income. No one can ever take it away from you. So if you get a job and you start working 2, 4, 6, 10, 40 hours a week, you get to keep all of that money. There's no withdrawal of your benefits. So that's just one major reason why the universal basic income is a good idea. But I'm sure you all have a question right now. Okay, this all looks pretty cool, but where has it been done before? Well, it's never been done on a national level, but it has been done on 2 pilot projects in the past 10 years, Namibia and India. From 2007 to 2009, there was a pilot project in Namibia. It was the first of its kind, and it gave $12 to every citizen in the village of Otivero Omatara, Namibia. Now that's equivalent to about 30% of the poverty line. This isn't enough to just sit on that money and just live off of it. You do have to use that money to bump yourself out of poverty. However, this saw an incredible amount of success. It saw a decrease in the population under the poverty line by 60%. It saw decreases in debt, child malnutrition, prostitution, increases in savings, household improvements, school attendance, clinic visits, a 300% increase in income generated by self-employment. And furthermore, all of these effects were diluted by migration. A lot of people had relatives in the surrounding area who heard about this, and so they went in and moved in with their family members in Otivero, and thus the effects actually would be even better if this was done on a national level. Furthermore, the Namibia pilot project saw no evidence of increased alcohol sales during this time. Now that's a really important point. A lot of people, when they hear about the basic income, think, well, people are just going to spend the money on wasteful things like alcohol and cigarettes. Well, the Namibia pilot project really did prove that wrong. Now in 2011 to 2013, there was a very similar pilot project done in India. This Indian pilot project took place in 8 rural villages and 1 sector of West Delhi, and it was structured very similarly to the Namibian one. Now the results are still being analyzed right now, but it does look like the Indian pilot project is reaffirming what we learned in Namibia. But I'm sure you guys have another question. Okay, it happened in Namibia, it happened in India, but America isn't like that. We're Western, we're a little bit more developed economically, and I understand that. So let's look at Alaska. Now, Alaska in 1976, I know it does count as America, even though it's way up there. However, in 1976, Alaska implemented something called the Alaskan Permanent Fund. What this does is it takes oil revenue and distributes it in the form of a dividend to every citizen in Alaska. Now, it originally started with $700,000, but after careful investment, it's now over $40 billion. And this dividend each year is given to every citizen between $300 and $2,000. Now, it's not a perfect example of a basic income because it's only given once a year and it's at a pretty low percentage of the poverty line, but regardless, it's an unconditional cash transfer to every citizen of Alaska, thus meaning it is a very good example of a basic income of sorts. Furthermore, it's politically untouchable. No one is willing to repeal this because everyone loves it so much in Alaska. This is a great example of why the basic income should be considered down the road. Furthermore, in 1969, President Nixon almost passed sweeping welfare reform in his family assistance plan. Now, this family assistance plan would have implemented a negative income tax, which is very similar to the universal basic income. However, after 4 years of debate in Congress, it was defeated by the extremes of both parties. The left said that it didn't go far enough in actually ending poverty, and the right said we shouldn't be spending anything at all on welfare. But the middle came together. The center left and the center right came together and said, yes, this is something we can get behind. So how did both sides come together? How did this bipartisanship happen? Well, from the right, you have people like Charles Murray, Milton Friedman, and F.A. Hayek saying, this is an example of small government. It's so efficient. There's no big bureaucracy. There's no more interviewing. There's no more applications. It cuts down drastically on the size of government in people's lives. From the left, you have people like Martin Luther King Jr., Thomas Paine saying, this is a way to actually end poverty, and you're trusting people in poverty to make the decisions that are best for themselves, instead of having Big Brother say, hey, we know what's best for you. Now, I'm sure, again, you're thinking, okay, this all sounds great, but let's let's see some numbers. What would this look like in America? Well, keep in mind, I'm just an undergraduate. I haven't researched this for years, but this is the proposal that I came up with. We currently spend $550 billion on means-tested programs, excluding Medicaid and Medicare, $173 billion on child tax credits, and $1.3 trillion on Social Security. Rolling all those together, we have an operating budget of just over $2 trillion. And if you convert that into a basic income, we can put levels of $2,000 for everyone 0 to 18, which would be paid to your legal guardian, $4,000 for everyone 18 to 24 to help incentivize education. I know all of us could use $4,000 extra right now. $6,000 for everyone aged 25 to 64, which is a little bit over 50% of the poverty line, which is $11,500. And then $14,000 a year for everyone over 65, effectively replacing Social Security. All of that together only costs $1.87 trillion. We would save money by switching to this. We wouldn't have to implement any new taxes or anything like that. This truly is an option. Now, I'm sure you're asking why I'm talking about this today, and it's because it's really exploded in the past year. On the popular social media website Reddit, there's actually an entire page dedicated to the basic income. 1 year ago, that page had 12 subscribers. 12. As of last week, that number just passed 10,000. This has exploded in the past year. Furthermore, you've probably seen articles on a lot of these different websites talking about the pros and cons of a basic income. And why are we talking about it right now? Switzerland. Now, Switzerland recently just triggered a referendum in which the entire country is going to vote on a basic income of $33,600 every year for every citizen. That's huge. That's above the poverty line. I'm not saying America should try anything like that. That's not going to pass here. But if Switzerland can do it, awesome. Go for it. You will actually eliminate poverty. Now, that is equivalent to about 42% of their GDP. Yeah, that's huge. The proposal that I just did was 8.7% of the US GDP, but like I said, we're actually saving money if we do that. However, if Switzerland does decide to pass this, it will not only be the first national example of a basic income, it will be the first westernized version as well. So the entire world will be intensely watching Switzerland to see what happens in the next coming years. But what's next for the basic income? We need more pilot projects. Especially if Switzerland fails, we need to see more pilot projects in westernized countries and in more developed countries, and more likely in more urban versus rural settings as well. It needs more publicity as well. I know that it's exploded on Reddit and on all these different places over the past year, but we need to maintain this momentum. And on top of that, we need more political discourse. We need to get to a point where politicians have to talk about this. A lot of people think that this could become a hot topic issue for the 2014 midterms. I think it's a little bit more reasonable to think it could be a topic in the 2016 presidential election. So keep your eye on the basic income, because we can finally reform welfare in the way that it needs to be reformed. It's about time that it's happened. Thank you.